Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of One-on-One from the Roundtable series. Today, we are hosting Rob Jones, the founder, managing partner of Coffee Planet in Dubai. And I'm very honored and privileged to have you here today, Rob. So thank you for joining us. We want to discuss with Rob how coronavirus has been affecting his business and what's the feeling in the Middle East in general, going into Ramadan. So Ramadan Kareem. And it's gonna be a discussion where we're gonna try with Rob to dive into what we have been discussing with him and the group of, I would say, the large roasters that we had a couple of episodes ago, and try to go more into how this has been affecting him personally and his business. So, Rob, going back to the conversations we had, we were talking about challenges and how different it is from every, I would say, geography. But I was thinking, like, in as we go to the Holy Ramadan month, the industry in the Middle East was used to have that month of, I would say, slowdown in their business because of tourism and because people are respecting the religion traditions there, and that has been always something that you were forecasting. So how this year, this whole thing is challenging your business?
Yeah, well, obviously, again, Ramadan Kareem to everybody who's observing the holy month of Ramadan. For us, obviously, we do forecast. We've been in business now 15 years. We started here in the UAE. So Ramadan has always been a part of our annual business and plans. And so we've been very good at forecasting the impact on our sales, because obviously, a lot of people are fasting during the hours between sunrise and sunset. And so it does impact us. However, obviously Ramadan changes throughout the year, and we've just started about a week ago, and it goes on for a month. So with the COVID crisis, obviously this came a bit sooner than Ramadan. And in a way, I mean, obviously we had projected for sales to be down, probably not quite as impacted as they have been. And I think, as we discussed during the roundtable, it's very, very difficult to project the true impact. Obviously, we're coming up to month end right now, at the end of April, and we're taking it a day at a time, and we're going to take stock, see where we are at the end of this month, and as we said, you can't see the finish line right now. I'm trying to speak to as many people in the industry, as many of our customers. Obviously, there's some high level insight that we get, which is, when are the airlines going to start to fly regular routes again? And they're saying not until sort of July. So that gives us a bit of an indication that this is going to go on another few months. But then for us in this part of the world, obviously it's a trifle hot in July and August. So obviously that's our slower months as well during the year. So this dip is being extended for us, whereas normally for March, April, May, we would have very good business. This dip that we would expect for Ramadan in the summer is being extended even more. So it's tremendously difficult for all businesses. I mean, not just us. And as I said, it's not unique to the industry. It's not unique to the country. It's a global challenge. So it's one of those things that I think we just have to rely on as much intelligence as we can get our hands on, and do our best to project as best possible.
So with Coffee Planet, I was always fascinated because your business model, it's quite different from what traditional roasters in the rest of the world has as where their revenue is coming from. I understand that your main revenue come from retail business, and your key accounts that for people that they don't know, it's the gas stations there. It's Adnoc and Enoch, which I guess that that industry is going through a severe crisis at the moment, as we see oil prices. I would say being on levels that nobody has seen before on the commodities market. And you, like the wholesale business, it's something that it's not something super developed in UAE, given most of them are chains. But you do toll roast for some of the big retail chains, I would say, in the industry. So for you, I understand the challenge is a bit different. Yet, though the retail channel is still, I guess, something that is really important, the national accounts. So how do you see that within your business, and where do you see, I would say, opportunities there?
So for us as a business, part of our strategy in the last, us as a business, how we compete. I mean, we're a privately owned, privately funded business here. We're not part of a big sort of local family, as a lot of the the bigger brands, or sort of franchise brands and international brands are. So for us, our method of competition is diversification. So we've taken this strategy to continue to diversify as much as possible. So we operate across a range of different channels. So the convenience stores certainly is where we started, but we do have a strong presence within the HoReCa sector. And wholesale, as you mentioned, toll roasting, private label, retail grocery, as well as franchising our own cafe kiosk and cart concepts. So that's part of our sort of gift, but it's now become our curse, because obviously, we are getting more and more impacted, where our hotel channels are practically zero revenue. Offices, our office channel, Office Coffee Solutions channel here is practically zero, because most people are working from home. Retail grocery is up sort of 500%, which is fantastic. We're doing a lot more online, and we've had to be quite agile in turning on new products and developing sort of new channels where we can, to basically try and keep the volume going through the roastery. But yeah, I mean, obviously everybody in the whole market across the wide range of channels that we operate in is either working from home. I think we've picked up a couple of new contracts. We have a very strong relationship with the government here, so we've been working closely with the government to support them and their requirements. So that's been very fortuitous for us. And then we have a strong healthcare sector that we support as well. So that that obviously has been busier than usual. And then it's a case of relying on online and retail grocery, which has been very busy, but still nowhere near the levels that we were forecasting 3 months ago for this period, unfortunately.
I see. Another issue that I wanted to discuss with you. I know that Coffee Planet has been for years very big in direct trade and sourcing coffees from all over the world. And I understand that now, given the restrictions both on travel and accessing the markets and getting goods out of the market, both in Africa and Latin America, how does this has impacted your relationships with farmers, and how do you see farmers being, I would say, impacted by that whole situation?
Yeah, it is a challenge. And yeah, so in terms of supply chain, obviously something that a lot of people don't appreciate in this part of the world. I mean, we source from 20-something countries around the world. we source direct, and we don't have the benefits of, you know, the big coffee stockholders that you do, you know, in Europe, for example. You know, have massive stockholder in coffee in Hamburg, you have massive stockholder in coffee in the US. In this part of the world, you don't have that. So everything that we roast, you know, we source direct. So obviously from a planning perspective and forecasting, you know, it's really important that we get that right. And obviously in times of crisis, it's very, you know, it's very challenging, because when the supply chain gets interrupted, I mean, we carry, you know, what do we carry? About 200 tons of stock, but, you know, that's not even a month's stock cover, you know, so we're quite relatively lean in terms of our stock holding. And it has been, you know, it has been a little bit of a challenge in the last couple of months, but we're getting, you know, we are getting through. Obviously, you know, the demand is down a little bit, so the supply chain interruptions have been, you know, have sort of matched that. But yeah, I think it's picking back up now. I think there was a bit of a blip, but it's picking back up now, which is fine. And obviously, you know, we're engaging with our farmers to, you know, to keep in touch with them, understand, you know, how they're being impacted on the ground as well. You know.
Yeah, that's what fascinates me, and there is no precedent in the market where you have demand going down, and then you have supply chain disruptions as well. And what we want to see is how this is going to play out in the markets, how it's going to play out in prices and payment terms for farmers. We know that producers are going to be heavily impacted, or I believe they're going to be heavily impacted when it comes to payment terms and getting the critical cash flow lines to get them continue production, or making coffee being a meaningful production for them. And do you see from your partnerships there any difference in accessing markets like in Africa, in Southeast Asia versus, I would say, Latin America, like producing countries there? Do you see where the difficulties are raising faster?
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously, a lot of what we source is sort of Central South America. We do source from Africa as well. But as far as I'm currently aware, a lot of our stock holding is in place for our Africans. And, you know, as I said, we've had some challenges with Central South, but it's been more to do with the logistics infrastructure. You know, ships being delayed and you know, shipments being delayed, things like that, as opposed to production challenges. Now, I think that's something that, you know, we need to anticipate, because it's you know, it's probably the next couple of shipments that, you know, that are really going to feel the impact from this crisis. Obviously, with the, you know, the supply chain, the products that have been arriving in the last 2 months have been on the water for, you know, 1, 2, 3 months, depending on origin. So I think that, you know, we need to be anticipating now, and we are anticipating now that there could be some interruptions in the supply chain going forward, and certainly from you know, Central South America on the basis of the, you know, the longer shipping times.
So for you as Rob and your team there, how stressful has this been as an owner of a big company in UAE? We know that over the last years, the UAE banking system, it's a bit different than the rest of the world, and access to funding was, I would say, more expensive. So for you as Rob, on a personal level, dealing with that, and for your team, how stressful has it been? Has this impacted your team one way or the other?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard. It's very hard, and I think it's, as somebody managing this business and having done so for the last well, number of years, 10 years, 15 years, I think every day is stressful as an owner of a growing business, and you know, we are extremely ambitious as a business, and that brings its own stresses. So we're quite used to operating in, you know, in sort of heightened stress, but obviously this brings a whole new dynamic to the whole situation. I think what I can say is the banking system here, yes, certainly is a lot more expensive than many other parts of the world. It's getting better in terms of the structures, the products, but I think the leadership here, the government leadership, the ruler stepped in quite early on to ensure that the banking systems, the local banks here, were supporting SMEs, and SMEs are you know, a vast majority of the GDP of the UAE, and it was something that they were, you know, very conscientious of, and ensured that the right amounts of support was provided to the banks from the central bank, and therefore from the banks to the businesses. So the banks have stepped in quite aggressively to provide appropriate support to those who need it, and we're working with our banking partners at the moment. Now, it's not free money. There's no furlough scheme here as there is in, you know, sort of Western countries and things like that. So, you know, there are a number of options in terms of deferment, but that any sort of deferment needs to be repaid at some point down the line. Obviously, we have a staff base of about 200 employees that you know, we've trying to keep them motivated and trying to keep the morale as high as possible, whilst also not knowing what the future can bring or will bring with this whole situation. And also, you know, we have people who unfortunately are suffering, you know, personally as a result of this virus. So we're doing everything we can to ensure appropriate protocols are in place throughout our supply chain to protect our staff and to protect our products and our consumers. So it is challenging in a number of different ways. You know, not only from a financial aspect of ensuring the survival of the business, because I think it's survival of the fittest kind of situation at the moment, because nobody knows how long this is really going to go on for, and also nobody has a crystal ball. So it's hard in that respect with regards to the financial aspect, but also to ensure that we are keeping everybody safe. I mean, this country is majority expatriates. Most of our staff here, if not all of them, are expatriates. So they don't generally they're not surrounded by their families. And that in itself, you know, is a challenge, because you don't then have the sort of safety and comfort to fall back on in these times of crisis. So we respect that, and we're doing everything we can to ensure that whilst we are working remotely, we are keeping engaged with our team. We're keeping communication lines open to ensure that, you know, people don't feel too distant, because I think, you know, from a mental health perspective, it's hugely important, and this will create issues that will go on for a long time, just from a mental health perspective, let alone, you know, the sort of financial aspect. So I think it's very challenging, but our team, our HR team, is doing a great deal of good work to ensure that everybody is feeling, you know, communicated with and engaged.
So I would like to go to a more positive side of all this. I know that you have been leading the market in UAE when it comes to super automatic machines. This is how you've operated to many hotel chains, to many offices and stuff like that. And generally in UAE, we've seen that even though it's a very traditional society as a culture, it's also very innovative as a country. Like it adapts innovation very fast. It tries to find new ways to accelerate digital transformation on everything from transportation to actual going digital. And what it's really interesting is that also that it's a society that it's based from in tourism in terms of income, apart from like oil or other kind of natural resources, but also like they have become a financial center for the greater region there, and all this is based around offices and automation and stuff like that. So do you see, being a leader on this one, how this is going to transform consumption habit or working habits? And do you see opportunities for you there? Because I know that you have vast assets of machines remotely located, and you are remotely managing those machines. So how do you see that as an opportunity? How do you see the innovation being driven in terms of consumption and access to the products?
Yeah, well, we have over 6,000 machines in the market, in a relatively small market. I mean, don't forget the UAE population is about 8.5 million people. So it's like the size of a small city in the UK. But certainly, they are geographically spread, and we've always been interested and invested in technology, and working with our machine partners to have telemetry systems in place and appropriate payment systems in place and monitoring systems. So that obviously now is very important. But I think, as I mentioned on the call, or somebody mentioned on the roundtable call, that the rate of I think dynamic change that will occur during this period will be tremendous, and certainly we will have years of innovation crammed into a relatively short period through this crisis, because people will be forced to innovate and to adapt. And it's stuff that we're working on right now with our team. How do you provide a touchscreen coffee machine to avoid the touch? So okay, if you have to touch it, what can you do to protect consumers? How do you dispense cups? How do you ensure that the consumer is aware of all of the standards and protocols that we go through through our supply chain to mitigate the risk of a transferable pathogen that we're sort of dealing with? And also then, how do you, it's hard to say mitigate against future risk, of other similar challenges that we might face, because I think that's more of a global, we're not going to solve that as Coffee Planet, but that's more of a sort of global approach. But certainly we are looking at all angles really to be innovative. But I think everybody's world will change. I think when we come through this, everybody's world will change, from a human perspective, from a commerce perspective. I think whilst it's very, very challenging, I think it's also tremendously interesting from a behavioral psychology perspective. I think everybody's world will change, and we will all be forced to adapt to a very new type of normal that I think right now we can't even sort of contemplate exactly how it's going to look and feel. Although lockdown is starting to ease in certain countries, and here it's there are certain restrictions that have been lifted. But still, I think it's going to be a while till we get back to, if we get back at all, to any sort of resemblance of what we used to consider normal.
I would like to thank you for your time today. It has been a pleasure and an honor, and stay healthy and strong. Thank you so much, Rob.
You too. Thanks, guys.